What happens when the man who built a buffet empire from scratch sees one of his own guests humiliated in front of a crowd? Mason Grady didn't plan on going back into the field. Not like this. 7 buffet locations across 3 states, built over 15 years. He'd started with one tiny place in a strip mall outside Tulsa, where he used to mop the floors himself after closing. Now, the company had a full marketing team, logistics department, and a district manager overseeing each location. Mason had stepped back from the floor years ago. He wasn't a face at the table anymore, he was the guy on the wall, in those framed newspaper clippings near the restrooms. But lately, something felt off. Sales were steady, but customer feedback from a few locations had started dropping. Especially the Springfield location store number 4. A few online reviews mentioned cold food, apathetic service, and one review that stuck with him. Felt more like a school cafeteria than a family restaurant. He asked for an internal audit. The report came back clean, too clean, so Mason decided to see for himself. He grew out a beard and dyed it gray, got a pair of thick glasses, wore a plain flannel shirt and khakis, nothing flashy. He booked a table at the Springfield Buffet for a Saturday evening under the name Doug. He hadn't personally met most of the front staff there. The general manager, Todd, had been hired by a district manager 3 years ago. Mason had approved the hire on paper, but he'd never shaken the man's hand. That night, he walked in alone with a slight limp he didn't normally have, just to keep things believable. The hostess barely looked up. 2, just 1, Mason said kindly. She sighed. Booth or table? Booth, if that's all right. Whatever, she muttered, grabbing a menu and leading him to the side of the dining area near the salad bar. The place was half full. Families, couples, a few teenagers laughing too loud. The food looked decent under the heat lamps, but Mason didn't see a single manager on the floor. A young server with a tight ponytail came up after 5 minutes. No greeting, no smile. Drink? She asked, not even looking at him. Water's fine, thank you, Mason said. She walked off without a word. That's when he noticed the older man sitting 2 booths down. Thin frame, worn jacket. A military cap rested on the table. He was probably in his 70s, and he sat alone, staring at the food on his plate like he wasn't sure if it was worth the effort. A moment later, the same server walked over to him. You gonna eat that or just stare at it? She said. The man looked up, startled. Sorry, just trying to remember if I took my meds. She laughed, not a kind laugh, a hard, mocking one. I thought old vets were supposed to be tough, she said, loud enough for half the room to hear. Mason's stomach dropped. The man blinked, embarrassed, and looked away. Don't worry, I'll bring you a kid's menu next time, she added, then turned and walked off, still laughing as she passed Mason's booth. He froze, his hand clenched around the edge of the table. He hadn't come here expecting perfection, but laughing at a veteran in public. That wasn't bad service, that was cruelty. He looked around. No one intervened, no manager in sight. The old man quietly picked up his fork and started eating like nothing had happened. Mason stood up. He walked to the front where a teenage host sat playing on his phone. Is there a manager on duty? The kid looked up. I think Todd's in the back. Tell him Doug wants a word. Okay, Doug who? Just Doug, he'll know. He didn't wait. He walked toward the back hallway where staff entered the kitchen. A few servers passed him, none offering help. He caught a glimpse of a tall man in a button-down shirt standing near the walk-in cooler. Todd, Mason called. The man turned. Yeah, I'm a customer. I just saw your server laugh at an elderly guest, a veteran, out loud, in front of the whole restaurant. Todd raised an eyebrow. What did he do? Does it matter? Todd shrugged. Some of our guests like to push buttons, not saying it's okay, but I'm sure she didn't mean anything. Mason stepped closer. She mocked him, loud enough to humiliate him. You need to handle it. Todd crossed his arms. Look, Doug, was it? I'll talk to her, okay, but we're short-staffed tonight. If I fire every server who slips up, I won't have anyone left. Maybe that's the problem, Mason said quietly. Todd narrowed his eyes. You're not from corporate, are you? Mason took a breath, forcing himself to stay calm. No, he said, turning back toward the dining room. But I'm not done here. He sat back down. The old man had finished eating and was quietly folding his napkin. Mason watched as he slowly stood up, took his cap and shuffled out the door without a word. The server never looked up. Mason didn't touch his food. Tomorrow he'd be back, but not as Doug. Mason arrived at the Springfield location the next morning just after opening. This time, no disguise, no fake name. Just a navy polo with the company logo stitched into the chest, khakis, and a clipboard tucked under one arm. He paused just outside the front doors, watching through the glass as the morning crew prepped. A young man was refilling the soda station while a woman in her 40s set out silverware rolls at the host stand. Neither looked up. He stepped inside, no greetings, no acknowledgement. He approached the host stand. "Excuse me," he said. "Is Todd in?" The woman stiffened slightly. "He doesn't usually come in until a little later." "That's fine," Mason replied. "I'm Mason Grady." Her face changed instantly. A quick flicker of confusion, then realization. She straightened. "Mr. Grady," she started. "Let's just go with Mason today, and you are Karen. I'm the morning shift supervisor." "Appreciate you, Karen. I'd like to walk the floor a bit. No need to announce anything." She gave a hesitant nod. "Of course." Mason moved past her, scanning the dining area. A few early guests were already seated. An elderly couple near the window, a father and daughter sharing pancakes. The buffet line looked clean, though the hot bar lights hadn't been fully turned on. A server passed him without noticing. He made his way toward the back. The kitchen was already running. 2 cooks at the grill, one prepping salad toppings. A third was elbow-deep in a tray of scrambled eggs. The air was warm, full of the scent of sausage and onions. "Chef on duty?" Mason called over the clattering pans. A tall, broad-shouldered man looked up. "That'd be me." "Name?" "Lewis." Mason extended a hand. "Mason Grady." Lewis stared at him for a second, then wiped his hand on a towel and shook it. "Didn't know you were coming in." "I didn't announce it. I'm not here for a photo op." Lewis gave a short nod. "Everything's running smooth this morning. Short one prep, but we're managing. I'll be shadowing for a bit. Appreciate you letting me observe." Lewis turned back to the grill. "You're welcome to it. Just don't stand behind me, I work fast." Mason stepped aside, watching as Lewis cracked eggs one-handed into a skillet, then turned and barked instructions to one of the younger cooks. There was rhythm here. Real effort. He didn't see the same tension he'd felt on the floor last night. He returned to the dining area. A teen with a messy apron was wiping down a table with a visibly used rag. Mason approached him. "You on bus duty?" The teen looked up, startled. Yeah, just started last week." "Name?" "Derek." "Good to meet you, Derek." "Who trained you?" The kid hesitated. "I mean, nobody really." "Todd told me just to watch what the others do." Mason frowned. "Has anyone walked you through the sanitation checklist?" Derek shook his head. "Didn't know there was one." Mason looked at the rag in his hand. It was damp and streaked with crumbs. "Where's your sanitizer bucket?" Derek blinked. "What?" Mason didn't respond. He turned and walked toward the back office. He knocked once, then opened the door. Todd sat behind a cluttered desk with a half-eaten bagel and his phone in hand. He looked up and his face drained of color. "Mason." "I figured it'd save us both time if I didn't pretend to be anyone else today." Todd stood. "I listened about last night. I saw what I needed to see, and I've seen more this morning." Todd opened his mouth, but Mason raised a hand. "You've got new hires out here wiping tables with dirty rags and no disinfectant. They weren't trained. You've got no floor manager visible, and last night I watched a server publicly humiliate a guest." Todd straightened. "I already talked to her." "You didn't. You dismissed it." "I watched you." Todd's expression hardened. "I run this place with half the staff we're supposed to have. I cover for people who don't show up. I dealt with 2 broken freezer units last week and didn't get a single call back from corporate. I'm doing the best I can." Mason didn't flinch. "Then your best isn't enough. You're the general manager. These people look to you to set the tone. What I saw last night wasn't about being short-staffed. It was about what you allow." Todd's jaw set. You try keeping morale up when every day's a fire. I did, for years. And I never let that justify disrespecting guests or neglecting food safety. Todd didn't reply. Mason stepped forward. You're done here. Todd's eyes widened. You're firing me, effective immediately, Todd huffed. You'll regret this. You think someone else is going to walk into this mess? Mason's voice was quiet. I'd rather have an empty chair than someone who makes excuses for cruelty. Todd grabbed his phone and stormed out without another word. Mason exhaled slowly. He returned to the front, where Karen stood near the host stand, watching him with a wary expression. You're the most senior supervisor on staff, he asked. Yes. You're now acting GM until we place someone permanent. We'll bring in backup from Tulsa this week. I'll be here for the next 3 days. Karen's eyes widened. Me? You've got 2 things I need right now, integrity and presence. I'll walk you through the rest. She nodded slowly, then turned and called for one of the servers. Mason caught snippets of the exchange, clear, professional, calm. He moved to the staff break room. A small whiteboard hung above the microwave. It was covered in half-erased notes, illegible schedules, and a faded printed sign that read, "Do not leave dirty dishes." He erased all of it. Then he picked up a marker and wrote in large letters, "Standards start with how we treat people, guests, and each other." He capped the marker and stepped back, watching the ink dry. A knock came at the door. Lewis stood there, apron dusted with flour. You meant it. Todd's out, he's gone. Lewis looked away for a moment. Good, we stopped speaking 2 months ago. Every time I brought up food temps or staffing issues, he told me to stay in the kitchen and do my job. You just did your job better than he ever did. Lewis nodded once. Let me know if you need anything. I will. The rest of the day moved differently. Karen reorganized the floor schedule. Mason stepped in and trained Derek personally on cleaning procedures. They pulled the full training binder from the back closet, one that hadn't been opened in months, and walked through it with every new hire currently on shift. By mid-afternoon, the tone in the building had changed. Subtly. No grand speeches, just accountability. Mason stood near the salad bar, watching as a young girl dropped a spoon. A server hurried over, replaced it, and knelt to the girl's level with a kind word. Her mother smiled. He turned to Lewis, who had come out to check the buffet line. You ever see that server before? Mason asked. Yeah, Lewis said. That's Jada. She's one of the good ones, doesn't say much, works doubles a lot. Keep an eye on her. I want to speak with her before end of shift. Lewis gave a short nod and returned to the kitchen. Mason stayed near the line, watching the guests. No one laughed cruelly. No one walked away ashamed. Not today. By Monday morning, word had started to spread. No official announcement had been made, but Springfield's staff walked a little straighter, spoke a little quieter. The older servers whispered near the back hallway, while the newer ones watched the floor more carefully than usual. Mason arrived in the kitchen just after prep began. He carried a fresh copy of the training manual under one arm and a plain notepad under the other. He didn't plan to sit in the office, not yet. He needed to observe without interference. Lewis was already at the line, calling out prep times while checking the steam tables for consistency. Morning, Mason said. Lewis nodded without looking up. Eggs are holding, but the sausage batch came in under temp. I already pulled it. Good catch. I've got the supplier's name if you want it. I do. Let's put it in writing. He turned and stepped through the swinging doors into the dining area where Karen was adjusting the seating chart. She glanced up and handed him a rough printout. Yesterday's floor map. I updated it based on how we staffed breakfast and lunch. We were short 2 runners, but the shift leads picked up the slack. Mason scanned the page, then handed it back. Any complaints? Only one. A woman said the fruit bowl had too much cantaloupe and not enough berries. I told her I'd personally pass it on to the kitchen. Was she satisfied? She smiled and said she appreciated being listened to. He paused. That's a win in my book. Karen gave a modest nod and walked off toward the beverage station. Mason turned his attention to the far end of the dining room, where a slim young woman was folding napkins at a side station. She worked quickly, hands moving with practiced rhythm. Her name tag read Jada. He waited until she finished her current stack, then approached. "Mind if I interrupt?" She looked up, startled, then straightened. "Sorry, I didn't see you there." "No need to apologize, I'm Mason." "I know," she said quietly, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. "I've seen you during both shifts. You move fast and stay quiet, I like that." She nodded but didn't say anything. "I also saw how you handled that little girl yesterday, the one who dropped her spoon." Jada's eyes flicked to the side. "I just didn't want her to feel embarrassed." "That's what good service looks like. You didn't wait for a supervisor, you just acted." She hesitated. "I try to do it right. Some guests come in already tense, like they expect a fight. I figure if I stay calm, maybe they will too." "That's not something you can train, that's instinct." She gave a small, careful smile. "What's your current hourly?" 14. "How long have you been here?" 18 months. "I started part-time while finishing school." "Stayed when my mom got sick." Mason took a breath. "Would you be interested in a lead floor role?" She blinked. "I thought those were only for full-timers." "They were, that's changing. I need someone who leads by example." "Not by volume." Jada's fingers tightened slightly around the napkin she was folding. "Would I still be expected to cover doubles?" "Only if you choose to. You'd have scheduling input and formal authority during peak hours." "More responsibility, but more flexibility too." She looked down at her stack of napkins, then back up. "I'd be honored." "Good. We'll make it official by end of week. For now, just keep doing what you're doing." He left her to her work and moved toward the front, where Derek was restocking the dessert cooler under Karen's supervision. He was focused, checking each label before sliding the trays into place. No shortcuts. Mason made a mental note to ask Karen later if he'd been on time both days. If so, he'd give him a small raise and an offer to cross-train. Near the entrance, a middle-aged man in a beige windbreaker stepped hesitantly through the doors. "Welcome in," Mason said, stepping toward him. The man looked around uncertainly. "Is this still the buffet? I heard it changed hands." Mason smiled. "Still the same place, just getting back to the roots." The man nodded slowly. "I used to come here with my wife. We stopped after a bad experience a while back." Some lady up front made her cry. "I'm sorry to hear that." She said she felt like she was being judged because of her weight. The server made a joke about portion control. Mason's jaw tensed, but he kept his tone level. "That's not acceptable." "It never was." She said she didn't want to come back. "I only came today because I heard someone new was running it." "Well," Mason said, "we're not new, just paying attention again." The man gave a tight, appreciative nod. "I'll give it a shot." Mason walked him to a booth himself and brought over a fresh menu. Then he returned to the back office. Karen was already there, reviewing the onboarding forms for a new dishwasher starting that afternoon. "I'm going to have HR expedite Jada's paperwork," Mason said. "I'll get her availability today and adjust the floor schedule." He sat across from her. "Also, I want you to start preparing a short list of external candidates for general manager." Karen's expression didn't change. "You don't think I'm right for it? I think you're holding this place together, but if I offer you the job without competition, it'll look like a shortcut. I want to see how you lead when you know eyes are on you." She leaned back slightly. "I can live with that." "Good." "You'll be part of the interview panel too." She raised an eyebrow. "Even if I'm a candidate, I need your instincts. If you're the right choice, you'll rise to the top anyway." She nodded once, then turned back to her screen. Mason left the office and stepped outside into the alley where deliveries were still arriving. A young driver was unloading cases of bottled water from the back of a truck. Mason approached him. "You from the Tulsa warehouse?" "Yeah, just subbing today." "One of our regulars called out. The last delivery had sausage that came in under temp. You aware of that?" The driver paused. "No, sir, I just handle the dry goods, but I can check with our cold freight team." "Do that." I want written confirmation that new SOPs are being followed for thermal shielding on all protein deliveries. Yes, sir. I'll message dispatch. Mason thanked him and stepped back inside. The lunch rush began with a slow build. A few couples, several office workers, two elderly women who asked for extra napkins before even sitting down. Jada managed the floor rotation with quiet efficiency. She redirected traffic during a brief backup at the payment counter and helped a new server reset a table after a spill. Mason sat at a side booth with a cup of coffee, watching the rhythm unfold. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Just before 2, a lean man in a gray button-up appeared near the front, scanning the room with a clipboard in hand. He wore a corporate badge clipped to his belt. Mason stood. "Grant," he called. "Over here." The man walked over and extended a hand. "Didn't expect to find you on site. You should start expecting it." Grant glanced around. "Place looks better already. Got the audit form you requested. Want to go over it now?" "Not yet. What I want is a breakdown of every complaint logged against this location in the last 6 months. Names, dates, and what actions were taken." Grant hesitated. "Some of those files are incomplete. The previous manager, I don't care what Todd didn't do, will complete them now. Go back through everyone and follow up with those guests if we still have contact info." Grant nodded slowly. "Understood." Mason stepped past him into the dining room, where a young boy was laughing as his grandfather tried to carry a tray of soft serve cones. A server rushed over to help them before anything spilled. Mason watched as the boy handed one cone to the older man, then grinned up at him. The older man wore a faded military cap. Mason didn't move. He just stood there watching them sit, watching the boy dig into his cone, watching the veteran lean back and smile gently. This time nobody laughed at him. This time someone helped him carry the tray. By Thursday afternoon, Mason had reviewed every complaint from the previous 6 months, cross-checked shift rosters, and followed up on missing training documentation. The pattern was consistent. Poor leadership had bred inconsistency, and inconsistency had bred resentment both from staff and customers. Fixing it wasn't about quick wins, it was about rebuilding trust, one decision at a time. He hadn't left the Springfield location in 4 days. Karen had stepped up smoothly, running floor checks between lunch and dinner, recalibrating staff assignments based on performance instead of seniority. Jada had already begun mentoring 2 newer servers, walking them through table pacing and how to read a guest's body language. Lewis, though he rarely spoke more than necessary, had started preparing a weekly prep schedule, something Todd had never once requested. But Mason knew the real test would come Friday night. It was the busiest night of the week, with the highest turnover and the greatest chance for things to unravel under pressure. He arrived early, dressed the same as before. Simple clothes, no badge, no clipboard. Karen met him at the back hallway, holding a freshly printed floor plan. "We're short 1 runner," she said. "Sasha called out with a migraine. I moved Jada to Zone 2 and paired Derek with the new guy, Malik. He's green but quick. You have Lewis's full prep list on the clipboard outside the walk-in. Good, keep your eyes on the beverage station." "It was bottlenecking yesterday. I noticed. I repositioned the backup carts." Mason gave a nod and continued inside. He checked the seating chart, then stepped to the host stand just as the first guests began to trickle in. The early crowd was mixed families with toddlers, a few elderly couples, some high school kids in dress shirts clearly coming from a local performance. Jada greeted each group with calm professionalism, while Derek quietly cleared tables without prompting. Malik followed him closely, mimicking his movements. At 6:30, the line stretched out the door. Karen hovered at the counter, redirecting guests to open zones and keeping wait times transparent. A woman in a wheelchair was escorted to a low booth without issue. A father with 3 children was offered booster seats and crayons before he even asked. Not perfect, but fluid, responsive. Then Mason saw her, the server from Saturday night. She had just walked in through the employee entrance, hair pulled into a high bun, bag slung over her shoulder. Her name tag Peyton was still clipped to it. Mason was standing near the drink dispensers when she spotted him. She slowed, then continued forward as if nothing had happened. He stepped into her path. "You're not on the schedule," she shrugged. "I was told to come in for Friday nights. I've been doing them for over a year. You were removed from the roster Monday. No one told me that. I made the decision. I watched you mock an elderly guest in front of a full dining room." Her expression shifted. "You serious? That guy, he was just sitting there like a zombie." "I was trying to lighten the mood. You humiliated him." "He didn't even say anything. If he had a problem, he could have spoken up." Mason didn't raise his voice. "We don't wait for people to complain about being disrespected. We prevent it from happening." Peyton's arms crossed. "So I'm fired." "Just like that? You've worked here long enough to know what we value. You ignored it, and when confronted, you didn't show an ounce of understanding." She scoffed and turned. "I'll be filing a complaint." "You're welcome to. You'll find our documentation is thorough." She left without another word. Mason turned back to the floor. No one had noticed the exchange. Good. The last thing the team needed was more disruption. By 7:15, the volume had doubled. Orders came in rapid fire. Malik ran to the kitchen twice in 10 minutes for extra silverware. The soft serve machine clogged once and was fixed within 5 minutes. A guest at table 12 asked for a manager. Karen approached within 60 seconds and resolved it before the guest had to repeat herself. At 8, Lewis emerged from the kitchen holding a small tray. He approached Mason near the salad bar. "I made something off menu," he said. "Figured you should try it." Mason took the plate. A small, savory bread pudding with roasted vegetables and a light glaze. "You planning to rotate seasonal dishes?" "Only if we can get support from the supply chain. I can make it work with surplus ingredients, but I'd need clearance." "Consider it granted. Submit a pilot menu for next Friday." Lewis nodded once and returned to the kitchen. Near the front, Mason spotted an older woman dining alone, reading a paperback between bites. Jotter refilled her iced tea without being asked and brought her a clean napkin when she noticed a spill. The woman smiled, mouthed a thank you, then returned to her book. At 8:30, a busload of college students arrived without warning. Karen looked up from the podium, eyes scanning the mass of 20-somethings in matching sweatshirts. "Do we have a reservation?" she asked one of them. "No, ma'am. We just finished a tournament nearby. The other restaurant canceled on us." "How many?" 32. Mason stepped beside her. "We'll need to clear Zone 3 and push tables together. I'll help reset." Karen turned to the hosts. "Tell the kitchen we've got 4 dozen extra plates incoming. Jada, you're on lead in Zone 3. Pull Malik to help run drinks." "I'll handle the reset," Mason said. He moved quickly, stacking unused chairs, wiping down tables, hauling in extra pitchers from the back. The students waited patiently. Within 12 minutes, the zone was ready. As they were seated, Mason heard one of them say, "This place already feels better than the last one." By 9:45, the crowd thinned. Jada was wiping down menus. Karen was reviewing the night's receipts. Derek was on his 3rd round of trash runs. Mason stood near the exit, watching the last few guests trickle out. One of them stopped a man in his 60s, with a slow gait and a gentle voice. "You the owner?" he asked. "I'm the founder," Mason replied. "Still involved. I came here last month. Wasn't gonna come back after how my wife was treated, but tonight was different. People looked us in the eye. That matters. I'm glad to hear it. I don't know what changed, but keep doing it." He left before Mason could reply. At 10:20, the doors were locked. Staff gathered in the back near the prep station. Mason stood before them, arms relaxed. "You've all seen what this place looks like when it's neglected, and you've seen what it looks like when it's run with care." No one spoke. "You did this, not me." "I just took the blinders off." He turned to Jada. "You're officially lead floor trainer, effective next week. We'll adjust your hours to fit." She nodded once, eyes steady. He turned to Derek. "You've shown reliability under pressure. We'll move you into cross-training beginning Monday." You'll learn prep and basic cashier operations. Derek's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. And Karen, Mason continued, you've led with consistency and clarity. HR will contact you about formal interviews for the GM position, but I'll make one thing clear. You've already shown you're capable. Karen didn't smile, she just gave a short, appreciative dip of her head. I'll be heading back to Tulsa tomorrow, but this isn't the end of my visits. I'll rotate through all locations quarterly, no notice, he paused. Not because I don't trust you, but because I trust the process and I need to stay close to it. A few staff exchanged glances, no one spoke. You're dismissed, go home, rest. You earned that much. They filed out quietly, some nodding, some just walking with a little more ease. Mason stood alone in the kitchen for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigeration units and the soft hiss of the dish sprayer being shut off. He walked to the break room. The whiteboard still held his message from earlier in the week. He picked up the marker and added one more line beneath it, being decent is not optional. Then he capped the marker, turned out the lights, and stepped into the night.